There's Joe.
Oh, that's the agenda. Okay. Oh, yes. Yes. So you do have one, right? One done. Yeah, that's the agenda. Essentially.
Water, coffee, and tea.
Thank you.
All right, I think everybody's here. Thanks for everybody showing up today. I think this is going to be a great event. It'll help staff kind of get a direction from the board on where they want to see public transit in Peoria the next few years. The last time we had one of these was 2018, so it's been kind of a 4-year thing, and I think we accomplished most of the things set out at the last retreat. So we've got a new board, so we're kind of wondering what the new direction is going to be. So moderator for today is Mr. Dave Lee. He's fresh from Connecticut, but he has told me he did grow up in Chicago, so he is a Midwest boy. He knows Peoria, he knows Illinois. I actually worked for Dave for 1.5 years when I was in Massachusetts. He was my RVP, so I do know him. I think he's a great guy. He has retired from First Transit. He works for a little part-time gig for NTI out of Rutgers, so he does some training. So we do a lot of the training through NTI, so we'll probably run into him one of these days. So. But before I turn it over to Dave, I'm going to give it to Patty Polk.
Okay. Okay, I just want you guys to know how much the ADA committee appreciates everything that you all did for us. But there were some people that really truly went above and beyond, and we have little thank you gifts for them. So, first of all, let's do Doug. Because had he not been so encouraging, we wouldn't have been able to do this event at all. You're very welcome. And if you don't like what you have, let me know in the house. And then I'm going to go to Kenny, because it doesn't matter what we ask Kenny to do, he does. He took everything down to the Civic Center. He arranged to get the electric bus there. And even though we had a few hitches, everything went really, really well. Then, the two that are like above and beyond, this is a totally new project for them. We had to ask them to insert this into what they already do in their busy schedules. And I think they were totally peaches for doing that. So I have for Desiree and for Emily. Emily. Life, because they both been such in all of it. There was, and I have to say, there are other things that I supposed to make and put in there, but I never got around to it. And then lastly, and I believe that every time I get a flavor, I need to bring a little something for everyone. Here's a little bag that tells you all about how wonderful it is to have you on our team, how much you're appreciated. Inside the bag, there is a pen that's made out of a puzzle piece. But there's also a button that says, we've never done it this way before. And remember in Ghostbusters, when they had the Ghostbuster thing and the red line through it, that's what this pen has. So I want you all to be receptive for what you're going to hear today, to know that this is the beginning of the process, as our facilitator has said, and that we need to continue with this as we go forward. So, is it too much, Desiree, if I ask you to give everybody one of these? Okay. And I'm done. Thank you all.
Thank you. We really appreciate that. That's great. So, anybody else got anything they want to share? All right. So, I guess you're on, Dave.
Do I have to use this?
Yeah, afraid so.
Oh, okay.
I didn't put that in your contract.
No, I didn't. Well, I'll try to multitask. Good morning, everyone. I'm Dave Lee. I've been with First Transit and its predecessor companies for 40 years. So Peoria has been a customer of our company longer than I've worked for them, which is pretty amazing. We've been a customer for as long as you've been a public agency, which is remarkable. I was 20 years plus as general manager of the state-owned transit systems in Hartford, New Haven, and Stamford, Connecticut. We operate Bus Rapid Transit. As Doug pointed out, I was an area vice president. I still work for First Transit, but I also make the plug for National Transit Institute. So I teach a class on transportation planning, and all of you should know that NTI training is free of charge for board members as well as transit agency staff. Most of the training now has pivoted to being online, so you don't have to travel to another distant location to go through the training. And if you're interested, talk to Doug or me and we'll make sure you get connected. Now, the purpose of today's gathering, and thank you all for coming. It's great to see this big turnout. The purpose is to begin a conversation. It's interesting that the last time you did something like this was before the pandemic, which changed everything. The most transformative, most disruptive event in our lifetimes. And so now is an opportune time to begin a conversation that will lead, hopefully, to a shared vision between the staff of CityLink, the board of directors, and transit management, a shared vision of what you want this organization to evolve into over the coming years. We're looking 6 or 7 years into the future. This isn't about setting goals and objectives for the next 12 months. It's really about achieving a vision of what you would like this organization to be. So, and I want to add that this is a conversation going on all over the transit industry. Every transit agency, more or less, is having this conversation now for 2 reasons. One is that we've gone through this incredible disruption of the pandemic. And what we know as we begin to emerge into a post-pandemic world is that the world in the future is going to look different for transit, different than it was in the past. It may be that you will find that the markets you serve are different that some of the changes that happened during the pandemic are permanent, or at least for the foreseeable future, that people will be not commuting to a job, but telecommuting and not driving to the mall to shop, shopping online, and not driving to a brick and mortar junior college. Instead, they can get courses online. So the future is going to look different, and now is a very opportune time to begin talking about how you want this organization to grow in the future. And the second reason is that 9 months ago, Congress passed the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, which is the biggest commitment of federal funds for transit over the next 5 years ever in history. So the resources are there in many, and Peoria gets a formula share of federal funds. There's also discretionary funds that the Federal Transit Administration administers. There are grants that you apply for and compete with other transit systems. But now is a time to really think about how you want to use these new resources that are available. And we want to start by taking a look at just what you think are the perceptions that are among the customers you serve, among the people in the community, and among yourselves. We're not going to do more than just record these for now, because later in the day, we're going to revisit it when we talk about what your vision is for the future. After we do this, we're going to talk about some key elements of the strategic plan. And we're going to, I think, tag team between what I say and what you contribute and some presentation from the staff. But right now, I think everybody got the questions we asked in advance. I'm going to put answers in different colors so we know what were board member comments and what were comments from staff. I got to put this in so that you talk. If I said in a word or a few words what you think is the perception of the general public in the Peoria metropolitan area about CityLink, what words come to mind?
Public transportation is needed.
Say that.
Public transportation.
Needed.
Essential?
Okay. What else?
I said four.
It's what?
Four.
And do you mean the quality of the service is poor or the people who ride it are poor? Or both?
I mean, both.
All right. What else?
Well, the new equipment that we have is noticed throughout the community quite often. But
What
I do
else?
work with a bunch of technical nerds, so they notice that one.
Okay. So you've made some investment in new technology and that's highly visible.
Yes.
That's good. What else?
Unreliable.
And why? And what? In what way?
In the service that's provided.
So-
to customers.
If the bus is supposed to come to my street at 10:07, I can't really assume that it'll be there at 10:07.
Correct, it's either running ahead of schedule because.
All right.
Driving it stuff.
Okay. Another.
I would, sorry.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I would say for like the general public, it would be inconvenient. A lot of people live outside of the city and they have their own vehicles to use for transportation.
So inconvenient in the sense that if I have a car, I can get where I want to go
It's
so
quicker
much
for me to
easier.
drive here and take the bus here.
Bus doesn't come often enough, it doesn't start early or go late enough. Okay. Another word. What do you, and this is the, if you ask people standing on the street corner in the middle of downtown Peoria, what do you think of the city?
I would say only because a lot of our buses are aging now, I would say dirty.
So that would be a perception of people, not necessarily the riders, but if I was just a taxpayer in Peoria, I'd say the bus is local.
I think anyone would probably say that, even riders.
Now, we'll talk about what the rider's perception is. Right now, we're talking about the taxpayers.
Oh,
the
I would
general-
say
general.
that, yes, for
Okay,
sure.
sure.
Just kind of like before I was on the board, buses are there, it's kind of a given, but how to put it in. It's, what do you say? It's not really affecting me.
Okay, so
Go
the
around
public
buses.
perception is the buses are there, but it doesn't affect me.
Go around and, yeah, it's somewhere.
We worked all our career on the far north side.
But,
We worked all of our career on the far north side,
yeah,
so we don't really think about it.
That's a very common public perception, I assure you. Anything else? You are all in touch with the public.
as an employer,
Yep.
we live on the north, our business is on the north part of the city. And so it was nice to have service come to that area so that potential employees could have a way to get to us.
So there are parts of the area that have benefited from new service and they're happy about it.
To piggyback on that, I just moved and had no idea how to get to the bus. I mean, I know how to get there, but it's not convenient for me as it was prior to.
Has that improved? If I was a brand new resident of the Peoria area, would I find it easy or hard to learn about transit?
I was
Okay, so getting information is an issue. But the perception would be that it's difficult to access. I may know there's a bus, but I have no way of, I really don't know where it goes, what time it runs, what it costs.
Let me say this, because it's like gnawing at me. I think the problem that we have in Peoria is that we are not large enough where public transportation is an issue unless you are disadvantaged. Because most of the people, growing up, my mother didn't drive, so we always use the bus. So the bus has always been something that I am familiar with and I take notice of. That is not the norm for most people. My children, for instance, wouldn't even, it isn't even a thought for them to ride a bus. And so I think that we need to gear our services so that it becomes more inclusive, so that it's just not people that are underprivileged that are using our services as the majority of our riders. We don't provide services. For instance, I live behind a shopping center. For me to get a bus, I would have to physically walk probably a good mile to the front of the shopping center to get to it. I'm old, I have a cane. So the answer, if I were to call someone, they would say, I need to hear transit. But what if I don't want to do that? I want to just take a regular bus. So I don't think that we have been inclusive enough in what we do to bring out people that would ride the bus that don't necessarily have to ride the bus.
That's a great comment. Yes.
Part of that is, or comments that I've heard from people is that either riding the bus or being down at the transit center, they feel unsafe in doing so because of some people that are attracted by the buses and the transit center.
Okay. Now that may be a perception, and that's a really good point because people perceive transit often to be much worse than it really is. And you may have someone who's had a bad experience once at the intermodal center and they saw somebody that made them uncomfortable. And now they say transit is, I'm not going back there again. And this is a big issue in the transit industry right now because there's been a lot of high publicity about crime in in big city transit. But the result is that there are people who's, once upon a time, people said, I'm not going to ride the subway in New York City because it's dangerous. It's full of scary people. And that sort of went away. But recently, there have been enough highly publicized bad incidents that suddenly now you get people say, I'm not sure I want to ride transit because I perceive it to be unsafe. And so and that's really important here. We're talking about perceptions. So if the perception is that transit is, and it's interesting, these are the staff comments, unreliable, inconvenient, dirty, and unsafe. That's what people who are not necessarily transit riders, that's what they think of transit, and that's maybe why they don't even want to try it. Anything else? Because we're going to, yes?
Well, I worked in Bradley for a million years, I think. And I was all the time pushing transit. And the kids that came from Chicago would ride it without a second thought pretty much, or from overseas, many of them. But the kids from the suburbs wouldn't dream of taking the bus. And when I asked why, they'd say, because.
That's very interesting.
And some of the neighbors around there didn't want to get the bus to go up and down all the streets.
That's interesting. So people, especially coming into this area to a college campus, bring a perception about transit from a different place. And you're right, a foreign student who comes from a big city will, of course we ride. That's how we get around. Interesting. All right, I'm going to move on, and we're going to come back to this list, but all right. That question was about the general public. What does the general public perceive the system to be? This question is, what do your passengers perceive? We asked, and maybe you've done enough surveys so that you actually know what the passengers are thinking. But if you haven't, the question, this is really much more important to understand what you think as a board member, as a staff person in management. What do you think your riders are, in a word, what would they use to describe the service that they use? Yes?
Drivers are rude.
Okay, what else?
Essential.
I'm sorry.
Essential.
So your passengers would say that you are providing an essential service. Did you get that reinforced during the pandemic when all over the country ridership plunged and you could truly say the people riding our bus are essential workers going to do essential jobs, and therefore we're providing an essential service to get them mobility? Yeah, okay, that's good. Your passengers would say that and that would suggest that a lot of your passengers are people who have no other means of transportation and depend on CityLink for their mobility. Okay, that's good to know. What else? What else do you think?
Inexpensive.
Inexpensive. We're going to talk about that a little later. It really is a bargain. What else would your passengers? Yes?
Unreliable.
Okay. What else? Who do you think a passenger would, do the passengers contact board members sometimes with their concerns? What do you hear from the passengers?
Inconvenient.
Inconvenient.
I've been on less than 2 years, and now we've had a handful of people who said, well, the route changed, it's not convenient. I mean, it doesn't go right in front of my house, because but I have to walk, it's just, and I think you get that with anybody. It inconveniences him whatsoever.
No, but that's fine. It's perception. And if the perception among your own riders is that they're they have to ride it, it's an essential service, but they're not really, it's really not convenient to their needs. That's an important point to keep in mind. What else? Who's marketing? What do you get customer feedback?
Yes.
Do you oversee the customer service?
No, I don't, but I do get like comments on our social media.
Yeah.
I mean, I said inexpensive. I agree with rude drivers, unreliable. We get a lot of complaints about people getting passed up on the route by drivers, which kind of falls under rude drivers.
Well, that's actually a different issue. The customer service is a big deal. And one of the things that we're going to talk about later, you all, I think, got in the material we sent out beforehand. You saw what your vision and your mission statements are. And those have been adopted by CityLink, and they're really good. Very few transit systems really get the difference between a mission statement and a vision statement. Yours is excellent, but one of the things in the mission statement is we want to have delighted customers. Who oversees the customer service? And what do you think the customers think?
They unreliable. Like today, we had buses broken down that Route 8 came in, Route 4 couldn't go out, so people were being late for work, so they're frustrated because they could not get to their jobs on time. Confusion from drivers, not treating them well, passing them up for not being on time. We get complaints because some of the routes are confusing. I think the number system sometimes throws people off what number you're supposed to be on and where it's going. I mean, we've done some recent changes, but I think we're getting used to that. But it's just general confusion.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I don't know everybody. I mean,
Oh,
some
yeah.
I do.
Well, I'm sorry,
Oh, I know.
we chose, I sort of thought, what we're gonna do.
Y'all know us.
What we do want to do, after lunch, we wanted to have the staff not only introduce themselves, but we're going to ask each of you not only to say who you are and what you do, but how long have you been doing it, and what are the 2 or 3 biggest things that you're working on right now that you want your board members to know are your priorities. But why don't we stop? Thank you, Patty, for raising that. I apologize that I just assumed everybody knew each other. So can we quickly go around, just tell us your name and your title, what you do?
My name is Martha Holwater. I work in the finance department. I currently oversee the finance with Christine, but I also oversee the customer service off the transit center.
Shannon Williams, and I am in. Can you hear me? Here we go. I talk really close. Shannon Williams, and I'm in HR.
I'll try to talk loud enough without the mic. I'm Steve Green, I'm the director of maintenance.
Jason Culberson, director of safety and training, and I also take in the customer complaints coming through the phone or email.
Marcia Baker, I'm the payroll administrator.
All right, Christine Bay, CFO. Right now, I'm currently working on our financial audit, right now.
We're on the board.
I think they know who you got, who the board member.
The guy in the middle.
Well, good morning, everybody. From the wonderful town of West Peoria.
Ken Minor, Director of Operations.
Jamie Arbogast, I handle procurement and the competitive grants.
Emily Watson, and I handle the marketing.
Desiree Carlson, executive assistant, and I work with Doug and the board.
I'm Bill Wambacher, I'm the attorney for the district.
Chris Peters, I'm the on-site IT.
Nick Stanford, assistant general manager with First Transit.
Thank you, and I apologize that we didn't do that first thing. Any other comments on what you, if we were to poll your passengers and say, what are your perceptions about CityLink? Anything else that you think the passengers would say?
I would think they think it's a valuable resource to their life.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. And hopefully they say, and that would be a difference between what your passengers say versus what general public would say. Aren't riding. People who aren't riding it may not perceive it to be important and essential to their life, as it would be to your passengers. Another comment? Anything else on this? Right. So the reputation, you certainly get. I'm going to draw, but we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about this now, but I do draw one conclusion, and that is that everybody seems to feel that from the point of view of your passengers, what you provide is an essential service. It's a resource that they depend on, that they really need, but they may not be very happy with the service they're getting. They have to use it, but they don't really like it. The fact that it's inconvenient, that there may be customer service issues, unreliable, can't understand the routes, but it's a bargain and it's essential for them. That may be good enough. That may be, you may say that's all we need for our vision, or you may well say before the day is out, this helps us understand where we want to go and what we want this system to look like in the future. Now, everyone should have an opinion on this. What is your perception? Not what you think the public feels, not what you think the passengers say, but you are more intimately connected to CityLink than anybody else. So what is your perception in a word or a phrase about what this organization that you work for correct? Inadequate. And how, just for the sake of this discussion, what would make it more adequate? It's inadequate because it doesn't cover enough of the area. It's inadequate because it doesn't, the span of service isn't big enough.
All of the above. But also, I don't think we're perceived in the community, unless you're using our service, as something that is vital.
Okay, that's a different, that's a really perceptive comment. That from your point of view, you don't have the public support from the general public for the transit service.
But to add to that, I don't know that we have made it clear to the public either that we need help with that removal or something to make it bigger, better. You know, so my perception is we haven't asked or we aren't there enough to let the community know what we're actually doing and what we're going to try to do. I mean, if you read our mission and vision statements, they're great, but what have we actually done to make the community know? And I don't just mean people that ride our bus, but I mean the general population.
Okay.
Unrealized potential.
Ah. That's a good, we're going to hang on to that one and come back to it. Staff? What's your perception? You work there. You work there, and when you meet someone at a party and they say, "Where do you work?" and you say, "CityLink," or do you say, "I don't know"?
I would say we waste the taxpayers' money.
That we waste the tax?
Yes.
Your perception is that the system okay. No, that's.
A lot of times, sometimes we will watch, the bus, the big bus. The only person
Interestingly, nobody said this from the public perception or your passengers' perception. Now, there are a lot of transit systems where you might have said, when you ask the general public, what about the transit system? They would say it's a waste of money. I don't use it. No one I know uses it. The empty buses are running around town. It's a waste of my taxpayer money. We ought to get rid of it, change it, something. But that didn't come up. So you haven't said that the public perception is that it's not important. But your own perception is that maybe there's waste that could be eliminated. That's fine. Yes.
Resistant to any type of change, including public or riders or staff.
Resisting change. So that is really important. And that's another one of the things we're going to come back to. Is that generally accepted that this organization has been slow to or unwilling to embrace change? There's a nod, there's a nod, there's a nod. Okay. Well, that's important because your challenge as part of this process is to say, what's our appetite for change? Are we interested in transforming the customer experience? Are we interested in transforming the kind of commitment we make in our society, or keep things as it is? And there are a lot of transit agencies where the leadership would say, don't fix it if it ain't broke. Tried and true and has served us well. We're not, we don't want to try anything new. So resisting change, that's a powerful inertia to overcome. But you can do it if you have the will. Yes.
I hate to go out and use but everyone should look at because this is what I hear many times. You can have it back.
I just want to see the button.
That when I make a suggestion or I say something to someone, the first thing they say to me is, we have not done that before, or we've always done this way. So I want y'all all to have these, because, and of course you got candy, but I've never seen something about candy. But this is, and I don't ever want y'all to tell me again that I say something you've never done that before.
Well, that's every business school course that talks about how organizations should evolve always begins by saying, how do we overcome the temptation to say, we always did it this way, it worked for 20 years, why should we change? And that's a very powerful decision to make, that you want to embrace change as opposed to stay the course. And you may very well choose to stay the course, but that's the decision you all will come together as a shared vision. Anything else? Your perception? Yes.
I would say this is, I don't know if I have a good answer for this, but it's a little bit of a view into what I used to think as opposed to what I think now. So prior to working for CityLink, I didn't know anything about public transportation. And probably if you would have asked me, in fact, I think in applying for CityLink, I was like, what did they do? Honestly, I didn't. I grew up in a little town, South Beacon, not the south of Beacon, but South Beacon, 5 miles past Beacon. We didn't have public transportation. My husband drove in Plattsburgh. He didn't know anything about public transportation. And so I didn't know what CityLink was when I applied here. And however, 9 years later, my husband takes the bus in every Friday evening to meet me after work. Now, he has to park at the airport and catch the bus there because we live now in Kansas City. But why? Well, just because it's an interesting experience for him. It saves some gas. We go on date night every Friday night, so we don't have 2 cars running around, and he doesn't have to wait for me to go all the way home and come back in. So that's one thing that's changed. Secondly, when we go to Chicago, I would have never taken public transportation, and now we do. And it was really fun, actually. It was a good experience. So what if we get lost, we'll get back to where we're supposed to go. So my view has greatly changed. I don't know what I think now, I guess, is that it is an essential need. People use it for various reasons, and they are vastly different. You know, people in Chicago use it for different reasons than people here use it. I get that, but I would like to see it change more to be closer to what Chicago, what their perception of it is, and how it's used there.
Very good. Thank you. Something else? Yes.
In spite of all the problems, I think you have got some very dedicated employees and individuals that are trying to drive this program forward. There are some bad apples, but there are some tremendously dedicated people that work.
And I think that probably includes your board members too. But that's great to hear, and it's nice to hear that somebody who's connected with this organization would say, my coworkers, or the people that I serve with, really are, for the most part, hardworking, dedicated. They want to do well. Because there are plenty of demoralized organizations where people just come to work but they don't care. And I get the sense that that's not the case. That's great.
I would say affordable because I don't think you would find any other type of transportation service in this area that's any more affordable than riding public transit or even riding paratransit. So, yeah. And I also, like Shannon, I grew up in a small town. Public transit wasn't on my radar, and I've definitely grown to appreciate the importance of public transit in a city this size.
Good. Good. Anything else? All right, we'll come back to this. Let's see how it goes. All right. This is a little harder. This is trying to say, imagine CityLink the way you would like it to be in the year 2030. What does it look like? Don't say we've solved the problem, you know, that we clean the buses better so the perception isn't that they're dirty. But try to describe your vision in all positive terms. If the system could be everything you would like it to be, what, in this idealized vision of the future, what would it be? Yes.
Staying current, up to date, not letting our equipment and our buildings deteriorate before we replace them. Yes.
And that's both vehicle and okay. Yes.
I'd like to see us expand to more of the communities outside of the Peoria area to bring more, because that way there, like we're going to it's more like into Chillicothe, Dunlap, and all the other surrounding little smaller towns. It's going to bring more business into Peoria area.
That is one of the challenges transit agencies face all over the country is the question, should we enhance the service that we already operate, or should we expand service into areas that are not currently served?
Well, even if it's like one day a week just to get it started. Because there's so many people who are dependent on transportation, public transportation, trying to get into Peoria for doctor's appointments, and they don't have that ability.
And we're going to come back to that. That's a great segue into one of the things we'll talk about later. Yes.
More transit-oriented development. You know, currently our transit center, even though it's downtown, there's nothing downtown. I mean, the buses come in, they all get there at the same time. People transfer from one bus to another bus, and the buses all go out at the same time. And even with the few businesses that are in the downtown core, once the businesses, you know, they're done working at 4 or 5 o'clock, it's like downtown empties and there's nothing there. So something to drive people downtown that, you know, transit brings people to, or we work with the city or in some type of development thing.
And that's one of the dreams of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, with all this new money that the federal government has, is to promote, use transit investment to promote economic development. And particularly, it was really interesting because am I not right that there's the possibility of a affordable housing project in downtown Peoria that would be close to your intermodal center? I think that's what Doug told me.
So
That's perfect. That's the perfect example of TOD, is to build housing, affordable housing for people that are likely to be transit dependent, to be right next to the transit system. Yes.
I want it to be more global. I want everybody in our area to know Prairie Mass Transit is a great opportunity. You can take it to go shopping. You can take it as opposed to driving the gas $5 a gallon, like Shannon was saying. I want it to be a more visible thing to everyone, not just necessarily to the people that it's essential to. You know, I want it to be a choice. And I guess it goes back to me. My husband was on board. When he was on board, we would ride the bus from time to time, just because he was a board member. So I want people to think, well, I could take the bus and go down Moss Avenue and look at the houses. I could take the bus and go to a baseball game. I want them to think of it as an option, not just because it's a necessity.
That's terrific.
And ADA, I'm the chair of the ADA committee, so we have adopted the word wow. And so I would like for us, when people think about our mass transit, think, wow.
Does that stand for something, or it's just the
It's just
idea?
plain wow.
That's a great, that's a really fabulously well set vision for the future, that transit becomes a preferred mode of transportation. It becomes an option for people that would not otherwise need to use it, but choose it. And you have a much more inclusive ridership. Okay, that's good. Yes, sir.
And I mean, I guess I'll add some more expansion on what Patty was already saying. One, you brought it up already, and that is making sure that we're servicing all the people that find the service essential. Because if we're not adjusting with partnerships with Peoria Housing Authority or whoever to make sure that the people that find our services, they have no other modes of transportation, we need to make sure we continually adjust to meet those needs. And then the other one is the opposite spectrum, more what you were just speaking of. And that might be to get people that don't find the services essential on a daily basis, but maybe there are additional things that we can get them to do to ride. You know, a park and ride service for, I don't know. Again, I want to go to the Chiefs game and I don't want to park downtown, but for, you know, this one day, I can, hop on the north side transit that we don't have and get down, for example, or some other special event, and I can utilize public transportation for that. I won't do it for work because I don't need to for all these other things. It might be for entertainment purposes.
That's
You said that you're like really highly flexible to needs of the customer. Like, I totally echo the sentiment that the people that need it the most, we've got to like laser focus on them and hear their stories, not just assume we know what they need to watch. Then also work with social service agencies like the other cops, registered cops, like just how do we get people there often, easily, things like that.
what in your, as you envision the future, what technology changes come to mind? Good. Yes.
We're gonna need more buses and drivers to use.
Well, no, that's fair.
I know that she. But, we're talking all of this, but we don't have the funding. And I actually had a, alderperson from West Peoria who was surprised that we used tax money.
Don't tell anybody.
She's been on the board 3 terms, I think.
Wow.
And he knows everything in the world.
Well, I didn't know that. Don't tell him that we use tax money. But thinking about, right now, the workhorse of the transit system is a 40-foot diesel-powered bus. You have adopted some technologies that have put your toe in the ocean to have your first electric vehicles. We're going to come, you don't have to address this right now, but we're going to come back to that because that's part of a vision of the future. What technology do you rely on? Same old stuff, which you could. Same, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But you may also say, we want the CityLink to be viewed as cutting edge, as a leader in developing and deploying, demonstrating new concepts, new ideas, and new technologies. All right, anything else in your idea? Yes?
I guess in 2030, for us to be viewed as more of transportation, not just fixed routes, and to kind of centralize it as not only do you get on the fixed routes, but there's other options too. I know you guys are going to talk about them later, but microtransit, scooters, bikes, and keeping up with the technology, not just our buildings and our vehicles, but technology too. We use technology and it costs money in order to do these things, like in the form of like an app, instead of all our tickets are tickets, paper tickets. And I know I don't know how to ride a bus. I get a ticket if I were, the general public. So I think that kind of deters the general public from using our transportation because all it is fixed route. It's the way they perceive it.
All right, fair enough. Yes, sir.
Well, I was going to say multimodal, and that might be, again, we're looking out, and is that even introduction of light rail or something like that? I mean, we were talking about other rail coming into Peoria, and I look back now, just say over the last 5 years when I've traveled to other larger cities, and when I go public transit there, I don't think I've ridden a bus. I've always ridden a train, whether I was in New York or Boston, Atlanta, San Francisco, where it's always train, but of course for larger cities too. So keep our eyes open for multimodal ways. Maybe the comment about getting out to some of the other communities if we start more rail infrastructure. Is it, a rail line that breaks to Peoria, and then after that you may have to transfer to bus line or other microtransit.
Do you have Uber and Lyft, the TNC companies here?
They're not really allowed. They exist.
Okay, but they're not. One of the questions we asked in the planning course is to say, are the Uber and Lyft are called TNCs, Transportation Network Companies, and say, do you look at them as competitors or as complements, or are they irrelevant? It sounds like they're irrelevant. Okay. That their business model is in jeopardy anyway, so we'll see what happens. That one, okay. Do you have bike sharing and scooter sharing? You don't have it at all. So you don't have a rapid. A lot of cities now have that. You can go to a rapid bicycles, and if you have a QR code on your smartphone, you tap it, and that you have an account. You can now ride it. It costs you so much for every half hour. It's geo-fenced supposedly, so you can't take it out of the central area. Okay, you don't have that, but you might. And when you talk about multimodal, that could well be part of it. Called active transportation options. Anything else in your ideal world? Now, you mentioned finance, and we ought not skip over that, which would basically say there's enough money to do what you want to do to meet your vision. Where do you get your money right now? A little bit from the fare box. We're going to talk about that later. Who do you get? Does each member town pay?
We have a small money, like 5 to 6% from our general operating from the mailbox
Yeah.
revenue. And we also get it from the local Peoria County tax levy. And we also have a federal fund and the state fund.
So you get some Illinois DOT,
Yes.
I'm talking about operations.
Operating, majority is from the DOT, IDOT.
So state taxpayers are subsidizing a large part of your operation.
Correct.
Oh, that's great.
Yes.
Where do you get the local money from?
Peoria County tax levy for the property tax.
So the city has is it dedicated to transit? Or it's
Yes.
that's just how the city
We have
rates?
to levy for that based on property tax every year.
So there's a certain amount of property tax, every property owner in Peoria is paying a tax.
Correct.
And that money goes directly to CityLink, to your budget?
Yeah, about 15%.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is that, property taxes are a very unpopular way of subsidizing transit. Around the country, that's a hard sell because people say, I'm gonna pay according to the value of my home, and if I'm not a transit rider, why should I pay? You get the same argument from empty nesters who don't want to pay school taxes, right? They say, why should I pay property tax to support the schools? I don't have a kid in the school. But you can make the case easy that having quality public education enhances your property value. So it's a good, whether you have kids in the school or not, it's good for your property value to pay taxes that support good schools. It's a harder sell when it comes to transit because people are less likely to envision having a quality transit system as enhancing the value of their property, which is what they're paying taxes on. Interesting. Okay. Well, we're going to talk about financing in a minute also. Anything else for this vision of 2030? Because I got one more question. Actually, two more questions. Thinking about what's on here, how, if you were those things, what would be changed? You talked about how you think CityLink is perceived by the general public, by the riders, and by yourselves. How would achieving that idealized vision change your reputation?
I think people would feel safer on the buses. And I think they would also drive ridership as well.
Oops. So we think ridership would increase.
I think you would also see an increase in choice riders versus people that only depend on it.
I hate this term, but it's often used in the industry, captive riders versus choice riders. People who are transit dependent, or transit dependent versus transit independent. You'd like to have more people choose transit who have an alternative. Leave the car at home. And I think that was who said they leave your car at home and your husband rides the bus, parks his car at the airport, could have driven downtown, but choose not to. That's nice to have more people make that choice. Anything else? You see the reputation changing if you did the things you envisioned in the perfect world. Not the perfect, but in a reasonable vision of the future, an ideal. If you could have what you want in terms of your transit system, how would the public react? You say they'd feel safer, ridership would go up, you'd have more choice riders, people would find transit as a viable option for them.
I think they would enjoy it, like actually enjoy being able to ride the bus and having that experience versus it just being something that they have to do to get where they're going. Because it should be fun. I mean, I go to a lot of events where there's kids and they absolutely are obsessed with the buses, they love it. But we get so many comments from the parents a lot of times, like, this is like a Disney bus, which just goes to show their only experience with a transit bus is at Disney World. Instead of being on a bus here where there's buses all around where they live. So I just find that interesting.
Nobody has mentioned something that is the common complaint in a lot of transit systems, especially smaller systems, where people say, all I see are empty seats in the bus. Do you get that from the public, that they say it's a waste of my money because you're running empty buses all over town? Now, often those are people who live at the end of the line. By then, the bus has been full and empty, but by the time they see it, it's almost at the end. It's at the end of the run. But hopefully, you have overcome the empty bus, empty seat perception. I would think that's one of the reputation things that you want to fight, is to have people say, wow, I see people riding the bus, now I get it.
I don't think we have that because nobody's paying attention to the bus and who's on it to begin with.
Say that again?
I don't think people think in terms of the bus being empty because they're not looking at the bus to begin with unless you are a rider. If I was just an ordinary person that's driving up down the street, I don't think about who's on that bus or
That's
not.
interesting.
Seats are empty because I don't think as a community the bus is even a relative thing. So I mean, just, you know.
They're oblivious to it.
Right, it's just like you were saying, you see a bus, you go around it. So, I mean, I don't think anybody's even,
I think
you know, they might if we start doing all this stuff and then we're asking them to pay money to do stuff, they might do it, nobody on there. But the intent is to make them want to be on the bus, but I don't think anybody cares right now one way or the other.
That's interesting.
I think it's an inconvenience to motorists around because it's something you have to go around or stop for or whatever. So a lot of, like, I've had people kind of like, I had to wait for your bus this morning. And I'm like, well, it's not my bus, but you know, it's like, you know, I think it's viewed by motorists a lot of times as just an inconvenience because it's something they have to deal with.
Okay. One more question. And then I think we'll take a little break. But here is the last question, and everybody here should have an answer. We've talked a lot of negative things, and people said, "No, my perception is that the bus is dirty, or the public's perception, or it's inconvenient." Every one of you is associated with CityLink, either as an employee, or part of the management team, or as a director representing a constituency. Hopefully, every one of you is sort of proud to work here. Now, maybe there are people who aren't. God knows there are organizations where morale is terrible and people say, I hate working here and it's a terrible place to work. But I'd like to think that everyone here feels some pride in their connection to what we've all agreed is an essential service. You've got to feel a certain sense of satisfaction. You work in a business where we're providing mobility for people who need it, essential workers going to do essential jobs. Well, in a word, what are you proud of? If people ask you at a party, what do you work at CityLink? I don't know anything about it. You say, well, I'm proud of CityLink because
of all the changes that we're trying to implement right now and what's coming down the road. I know one of the things that was mentioned to me when I was interviewing for the position is, we have this new facility that we're going to be doing, these new route changes we're going to be doing. We're looking at new vehicles in a couple years. And, for me coming on to this agency, I look at it as, something we're going to be doing and building upon. And, it does make me proud to do that.
okay, you're proud to be part of an organization that it appears is going to be experiencing some change, and you want to be part of that. That's great. Someone else? Yes.
I want to make a statement, and I don't want people to get upset. But as a new board member, I'm not feeling that you guys are real happy all working here. I don't see people smiling. I don't see people being friendly toward each other. I don't see any kind of teamwork. I don't see any kind of, so my perception as a board member for what I've seen in this past year, I wouldn't think any of you particularly like your jobs. Now, I'm just telling you the perception that I have gotten. Everybody is unhappy about something. Everybody is just like kind of in their own little, I don't see people smiling. I don't see people talking to each other. So I just want you to know my perception of what I see from staff.
I want to go over and add teamwork to the idealized vision.
Okay.
But react to that, staff people, smiling staff people.
Like I said,
No, I think, no, look, you can't have this conversation unless we're open and it's a public meeting, but it's just, there's no one else here. So we could even invoke the Las Vegas rule, what happens here stays here. But that's, you make a really powerful challenge to the rest of the team. So, folks, what do you think? Is she got it right? Do you work well together? Do you feel camaraderie? Do you feel high morale? Or do you feel lousy?
I'll comment. I agree. It does feel sometimes that we are departmentalized instead of a team. We are, administration. We should work as an administration department. You have operations, you have maintenance, and more administration. So sometimes I think that we do departmentalize each other, and then we have conflicting ideals, and sometimes it might be perceived that we don't get along because of that. So I would agree with saying that.
I want to ask the maintenance manager, who's been very quiet here, but
I don't know, when I leave, I'm gonna look back and I'm gonna enjoy the view of everything we have. We work on projects and we work at it 100%. I don't like leaving things undone or incomplete, but I disagree with that. We can't work together, but we are busy, so we may not be hanging out or being friends together.
And that's not, okay, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying you need to be buddy-buddy. But I don't see just across the board respecting each other for the jobs that we do. Now, I can only speak because the majority of the places I have been would be at the administration office, and then I've been down at the transit center. So I'm just telling you, I'm not saying that you don't do your jobs well. That is not what I'm saying. But the reason why I give you this little bag of stuff is because I don't see you all working together as a team. I need to know that marketing feels that maintenance is just as important as operations, that finance thinks that marketing is important as everything else. And I'm not seeing that. I see, as Jamie said, this departmentalization of stuff, that everybody is doing their own job. And I'm not telling you that I don't think you're doing it well. If you weren't doing it well, we wouldn't be where we are as an organization. But the other side of that, and part of this is because I come from corporate, is that if you don't have a team that's working together for an organization, valuing everybody, every department, then you won't succeed. So I'm just saying, from my perception, being from corporate, being from forever since dirt, coming from other nonprofits, from governmental agencies, you need to have a team that is respectful of each other and not just so focused on what you're doing. Or, like Emily's out here doing marketing. It'd be great if you guys were telling her, oh, we did this, or safety's doing this, or how many times do you have conversations with each other? And I'm not saying hang out for the water fountain and not do your job, but I am saying that you need to have some kind of professional courtesy of each other and respect each other in their jobs. And I'm just, you guys show me, because I'm not seeing it. And I didn't say it to hurt feelings, I didn't, but I'm just giving you my perception from having 50 years in just corporate work and what you have to do to work as a team to be successful. You need to have fun. You need to enjoy coming in here every day. And honest to goodness, when I see you people, I don't see anybody that looks like they're having a good time or like they're glad to come. When I come to a board meeting, I really am glad to be there. I'm glad to see all of you. I'm glad to hear what you've been doing. But I don't see that amongst yourselves. So I need to see it.
Well, that's why the question was about pride. And in a perfect world, everybody in the organization feels they are contributing to a mission that is really important. They feel they are contributing to something that brings them satisfaction, makes them feel like they're part of something important. Serving the public, serving goals that go beyond just moving people around, but being an instrument of public policy in various ways. And it's sometimes hard to get people who are outside the operation to feel that way. And sometimes it's hard to get people who are inside the operation to look beyond the day-to-day problems. So it's a fair question if the people who work in accounting feel like they're part of a transit system or just part of an accounting department. Do people in the maintenance department feel that they have some understanding of when the bus goes out in the morning, what it's doing? It's serving a public need. It's carrying essential workers to essential jobs. And you're supporting that because thanks to you, the bus is functioning. And can we look beyond the immediate problems of hiring enough drivers and disciplining the people who get in trouble, trying to prevent accidents, to say, I feel wonderful about what CityLink does, and my part in it is this. That's a hard thing to do, and I thank you for raising it, because when we say that we're beginning a conversation today, we're not going to solve all these problems, but you're helping us to frame the challenges that we'll have to be followed through on, and that's a challenge for me. What can they do to promote more teamwork? I came from a much bigger transit system in Connecticut, but one of the things that struck me at one point when I became general manager was that there were a lot of people doing jobs at the bus company who really didn't know what the rest of the place was all about. And it started with people in the finance department. It said, I'm a payroll clerk. Why do I need to know anything about operations and maintenance? Well, how do you feel like, what do you feel? Because if all you think of yourself is my little cog in the big wheel and I'm just doing the payroll, then you could do that anywhere. Why does any job give you a sense of pride? What's the difference? I count the beans, whether it's a private company, a public agency, whether we carry people, whether we make widgets. So we try to take people, and I don't mean to pick on the finance department, but that's one place where it's easier for people to feel compartmentalized and say, all I do is move, I count the money, I pay the bills, I keep the ledger, I write the paychecks, make sure that the payroll deductions are done right. I do it. That's all I have to do, right? You say, well, have you ever come on? Don't do that for one day. We're going to show you around, have you walk through maintenance and see what the people whose paychecks you're processing, see what they do all day, and see if that makes you feel good that you're helping manage in one small way this much bigger enterprise. I don't mean to pick on that, because you could say that for every single part of the organization. If I'm in customer service, I say all I get are complaints. Well, let's go out and see all the things that don't represent complaints. there's often a tension between operations and maintenance, right? Maintenance says those drivers break everything. We fix it and they put it out on the road and they break it. The drivers say maintenance doesn't. You know, I had my bus broke down and it made me feel bad because I couldn't serve the customers and I had to explain to people that I'm running late because everything was bad. It's all maintenance's fault. So how do we get you guys to feel like you're working as a team?
Just like you said, we meet in the hallway, we discuss what the problems are. I mean, every morning we walk in, there's 4 or 5 buses all the way down. And so it automatically starts that being automatic. A lot of hours. And then what they do is they catch all the cane and all the sand coming back from the public because I couldn't get to my bus because no bus showed up.
And then transportation says, and it's HR's problem because I don't have enough employees. Why can't you get me all the drivers I need? And then, oh, wait a minute, the safety department didn't train them very well. And that's why we had accidents, because it's all safety. Well, and in an organization that has a safety manager, there is a tendency. This is really a hard. I don't know what the ethos is here, but it's very easy for people to say, "Oh, it's a safety problem. It's his problem." If you have mechanics that are getting injured on the job because they're not following safety protocol, it's his problem, not mine. You have bus operators that have accidents, his problem, not yours. How does everybody feel together that they have a duty to promote safety? And that's a big deal with First Transit. And hopefully some of the things that First Transit brings to the table help to promote that. But I think you've raised a question that goes very deep to how we take what we talk about today and move forward, because there are things you can do that promote team building. And if you've had a corporate experience, you know what those things are.
I just want to say, the reason why I gave you facts, I want you to read what it says on the little label. Know that this puzzle piece means that we are all essential pieces to make CityLink work. And whatever you can do individually, to do that, I want you to think from a different perspective about what can we do as a team, not what can my department do and who can I blame for something that didn't go right. That's all I'm saying. Okay.
Yes, sir.
I just want to add one piece, and you started hitting on it, and that is for all the puzzle pieces to work and everything like Patty was saying. What I didn't see, even when I saw the agenda for today, I gave some feedback. I said, okay, well, if everyone is working in silos and everyone's doing their own thing, which is a natural thing in any business, what's going to drive everyone together? And this is the first, as you kicked off, this is the first retreat in however long. Well, where's the organization's strategic plan and goals on an annual basis? So if we don't have something to put all the departments together to drive towards whatever those common goals are with that strategic plan, naturally people fall into, well, I'm only going to do what my department does. I don't necessarily know how I'm going to do all those things you just said. How do I make all that work together if we're not working on the same playbook? So every team member, everyone that hears playing a sport or singing a choir or been in a band, everybody knows each part of the team, each part of the band does their own thing, but essentially you got to be on the same sheet of music. And if everyone's on the same sheet of music, you're always going to just do what they do.
Good point. We've been at this for a while. Why don't we take about a 15-minute break? And we'll come back, and then we'll talk about some specific elements of this strategic planning.
Restrooms are right down the hallway here. Well, it was from
we make heads for everybody, so I can use some feedback. Are you
Whatever you introduce, they can
Oh, this is awesome. This just started. She did, yes. Yes, that happened. Luckily, I was just outside. Sorry. I'm like, you know how you work with this phone, this kind of yeah. So then like the. Oh, I'm running right now, so, yeah, I would go,
Yeah.
We care about clean air in Peoria. Right there, it's right there.
I'll start it and then I'll hand it over to you.
I guess, well, Nick and Steve.
So it's just the left and right arrows to.
Everything's all sorted out.
Still hanging out with you, girl?
I can think of, I'm used to sitting in chairs with the kids off.
Oh, yeah.
Whatever it's done.
You print that out.
Yeah.
The top part.
Also, I write something here. Yes. There is a pride and I don't care that people Android. It. Like right here.
Yeah, yeah, John did.
There is.
And so it's just little, but you can see it. Oh, that's nice. So I didn't even know that they were about it. I mean, honestly, that's a day for people. So it's kind of a neat, it's just kind of a neat little.
Well, we're gonna try to get everyone back, so. If we can, we'll reconvene in 2 minutes. And being in the bus business, we know 2 minutes.
Okay, I think it's time to restart again. Is that what you wanted?
We've been trying to do it for 22 years, just can't do it.
Don't like to use somewhere.
Okay, we're going to reconvene. And this has been, hopefully, this has been a helpful discussion to begin some understanding of what are the strengths and challenges for this organization in terms of how the public perceives you, how your riders perceive, how you perceive yourself, where you would like to go, what you would like this organization to look like in the future. And that becomes part of a strategic plan. We're going to talk about 3 elements of the strategic plan. Yes. Oh, I need them here. Okay, we're going to talk about 3 aspects of the strategic planning. Now, there are many, many more, but these are sort of 3 good places to start. And the first place is to ask what your vision is about the role CityLink should play as a leader in promoting green technology in this area. And the reason I bring that up is that one of the emphasis areas that Congress wrote into the multi-year authorization bill for transit was an encouragement that transit be the leader in promoting green technology. And that really means zero emission vehicles. Now you've got how many battery electric buses? 3. You have 3 battery electric buses, and on the side, you write, "We care about clean air in Peoria." So the question to all of you, but particularly the board members, is, what is your commitment to make that happen? The reason this comes up is that all over the country now, there is a lot of action taking place to promote that kind of technology. The state of California has said that starting in 2029, they will not allow any transit agency to buy a bus that is not zero emission technology. That's 6.5 years from now. No more diesel buses in California. No more new diesel buses. Chicago Transit Authority has a fleet of 2,000 buses, almost all of them diesel powered. They say that by the year 2040, they will be all electric. They've committed that maybe the next bus they buy will be the last bus they buy that's a diesel powered. Antelope Valley Transit Authority in northern Los Angeles County claims to be the first transit system in the country that is all electric. And down the road in Champaign-Urbana, they are proposing one of the most ambitious projects in the country. Now, they haven't pulled it off yet, But what they want to do is build a giant solar array that will generate the electricity to crack water molecules into oxygen and hydrogen. Oxygen they can release to the atmosphere. The hydrogen becomes part of a hydrogen fuel, and it's the fuel that fuels a fuel cell, and they will have fuel cell buses. And that's a zero emission vehicle. The only emission from a hydrogen fuel cell is warm water, distilled water. You can drink it. So the point is, they're thinking about being not just zero emission, but zero carbon footprint. They think because if you have an electric bus, which is great, if the way the electricity that recharges that bus's battery is manufactured by your local utility company is by burning coal, that's a add greenhouse emissions and carbon footprint. Even if they burn natural gas, there are very few. Well, I should ask your local electric utility. What do they burn to? Coal. Oh my God. Well, that's so. If you burn a lot of coal and put that pollution, that greenhouse gas emission into the atmosphere in order to create the electricity that repowers this bus, the bus is still zero emission, but the utility that's an issue. So the question is, where do you want to go? And this isn't to say you have to say. You may say, we're perfectly happy doing a sort of a token effort along these lines. That's good enough. We'll get some more electric buses, but that may be all we need. Diesel power is proven technology. We've used it forever. It's a whole lot cleaner today than it was a generation ago. So we can say that a clean diesel bus is pretty good. But we now have a presentation from staff that's going to talk about your fleet and future technologies. Before we go into the discussion, I'll turn it over to Linda.
Or Steve. We're both going to talk.
Hello.
We both got a lot of things to say about it. But he made a really good point, though, about how you go about getting the fuel to fuel your electric buses. So we've kind of thought about that a little bit. So this is kind of our majority of our fleet now. So right now we have, is it 44? Yeah, 44 diesel Gillig buses. And like you mentioned, we have 3 electric buses. So recently, Jamie applied for funding to ask for more money to get 4 diesel buses. And then another time, about 2 months ago, or about a month ago, she asked for additional funding, somewhere around $40 million to finish, hopefully trying to replace the rest of the fleet. So our current diesel buses, they're 2011, 2012 diesel Gillig buses. So they're all eligible for replacement. And how we got here is, what happened was in 2010, 2011, they ordered 46 diesel buses all at once. So now the situation that we are in, and Kenny kind of alluded to it earlier, is all 46 of our buses are all eligible for replacement, and they all are starting to fail at the same time for a lot of the same reasons, maintenance-wise. Yep, I already kind of mentioned this. This is the current state. This is the worst one. I think it just recently got wrapped up, didn't it? Yeah. But we took this picture intentionally to kind of show you like this is the state of a lot of our fleet. This, you know, the decals and everything are starting to fade off. They're starting to strip away. And you know, like we've been talking about all morning, is perception is reality, and this is the perception.
Wrap takes off the decals. When we remove a wrap, this is what we have left.
And
So we want to put another wrap on it, and I'm looking.
I believe it's the PCCEO wrap.
Yeah, it is. It's the pieces.
Wraps cover the windows so people can't tell how many riders you have.
So also included in our fleet are 4 40-foot New Flyer diesel electric hybrid buses, the New Flyer buses. We have 4 of these. This is another option we could go towards. It's getting all hybrid fleets. There's a lot of transit agencies out there that do hybrid fleets. We could talk about it. We have our own opinion and issues with hybrid fleets. So
One of the main reasons is a hybrid bus only gets 0.5 mile per gallon better than our diesel bus, including extra cost. Training of a new system, not including a diesel system, but also a high voltage side, which is another danger. And it's more training. Batteries, what do we do with the batteries when we're done?
So currently we have 3 different types of buses in our fleet, which means you have 3 different manufacturers, which means you have 3 different kinds of training you have to do for everybody. And you have, none of the parts are universal. So you wait on parts for specific types of buses. And that becomes an issue. So we're hoping to keep our fleet with at least 1 or 2 manufacturers going forward.
Nick, next question.
Yes, sir.
She applied for $40 million. What do these buses cost? What's a diesel bus run? What's a battery operated bus run? What's a hybrid bus run?
Well, inflation is taking a toll on this. Diesel buses back, before the pandemic were about $400,000 or $500,000. Now you're looking at 6 to 7. Or Proterra buses were a little over $1 million. Now we're looking at like 1.2, 1.3. I think she was quoted for them.
And these hybrids back in the day were 748,000 a piece. Now they're getting close to $1 million.
Thank you.
I can add to that. Our new flyer rep told us that within the next year, there's going to be a 20% increase in the cost of the current vehicles. Is what the market's expecting.
Yep, kind of went over this. We have 3 35-foot Proterra battery electric buses. And, just one thought I just had is, we chose 35-foot buses intentionally with our electric buses because they can be put on all the routes. 40-foot buses can't do all the routes because there's some turns in Peoria they just can't do. So that limits your service to the public by getting 40-foot buses. And we also didn't see the justification of getting those because we can't fill them up. And you go back to they're empty all the time. So this way you have a 35-foot bus, reception, they look full, great, use transit.
Something about the infrastructure that upgrade will have to do if we launch our fleet.
Yeah, those minutes.
Good. You're driving, moving along.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'll keep going quicker. So to talk about what Doug was just talking about, you get electric buses and you power them with 30 fuel. What's the point of doing that? So in our new facility, we're going to end up hopefully putting somewhere around 300 to 400 solar panels on top of our building. So you charge your electric fleet with renewable energy. And they think that our power consumption on good days is what our electrical engineers keep telling us is it should be able to power about 40 to 50% of our facility, which is great.
And why we went to electric instead of hydrogen? Champaign does have their solar array working and they're producing their own hydrogen. That whole setup, $5 to $6 million, they can do 6 buses. And with that setup, they can actually expand to 15 buses. But they don't have to have a whole new system put in to go any more than 15 buses. So right now, the technology is not there, but the concept is sound. So we don't know 10 years from now, hydrogen may be the choice that we go to. But any choice we do make, we're stuck with that choice for 12 years. 500,000 miles in 12 years is a benchmark for the FTA for what a big route bus is to last. You can't change, you can't get rid of it. The next and better thing came out 2 years later, we're stuck with the old technology. So it's a risk.
And then additional upgrades we have to do. So originally our campus downtown had about 2,500 amp service coming into it. Well, when we went and told our electrical engineers that our ultimate goal, the way that we ended up going, is to do somewhere between 20 and 25 electric buses, we upgraded that to 4,000 amps. Well, they started doing even more math. We started telling them that, the winds are starting to change. We really need to see if we need to go electric. And if we end up getting 20 to 25 electric buses, you're looking at 10 to 12 chargers. Each charger takes about 1,000 amps. So we are now in the process of getting infrastructure plans in place during our build now to do 6,000 amps, which means we would be able to fuel the entire fleet. But that's an infrastructure upgrade that we would have to do. It's a big service. It's 3 transformers are gonna have to go into our new campus downtown to power everything, to be able to support all those chargers charging our buses. I mean, will they all be charged at once? No, we'll stagger them, but you also never know. You done?
Before you go on, the H2O is, it's not a water bus.
Yeah, say it's not a water bus.
In the CNG, Metrolink in Rock Island, they promoted 5-6 years ago, a bunch of CNG buses, and the fueling station they have is so elaborate, so expensive.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, I don't think they're continuing going that way. Now they have 18 electric buses up there in Rock Island. So it looks like the trend is going electric right now.
There's more me. Go ahead.
So with the solar array plan, would that be, would the capacity be built to fully sustain the fleet? Or would it still need to be supplemented by, electric from grid or would it be enough to actually return power to the grid?
It won't.
It's important,
Okay.
especially during peak times.
We can't fit enough solar panels on top of our building to do that. If I could put 1,000 solar panels up there, I would, but we can't. And we don't have a field like I think it's Champaign. They have an entire cornfield that they bought, stripped it, and just put. I don't know how. I've seen pictures of it. It's
It's actually working now. They just got it working 2 weeks ago. So it's actually doing what it's supposed to.
And then our other project with doing charging our electric fleet is we're putting solar panels on the transit center downtown. They're up there. We're waiting to get them the rest of it hooked up, waiting on some parts and some other little minor details. But our goal hopefully is to put some rapid chargers downtown that are completely fueled on solar panels from downtown, so we can fuel those as well. And then they have told us that the power generated from those solar panels should be enough to bank it and send it back to the grid. So downtown, that's possible. At our facility, probably not. So effective in May of 2022, we had this past, just a couple months ago, we had 5 to 8 diesel buses that were up for replacement on years and miles regarding their useful life, which Steve kind of talked to. So Jamie applied for replacement of these buses through grants such as the Bus and Bus Facility, the Low Emissions Vehicle Program. We applied for 4 electric buses and 4 diesel buses, and we are going to try and obtain a mix of 24 diesel buses and 22 electric buses. And Mr. Green can tell you why we're kind of thinking about doing a hybrid fleet of electric and diesel.
It is our goal to reduce our carbon footprint. And as I said about technology and how it's evolving, I think it'd be reckless on our part to go say we're going 100% electric and it doesn't work out, then what do we do? So I'm more cautious in saying, okay, let's try 50%. We'll go 50%, diesel, 50% electric, and have a hybrid type of service. With that, we could, the contingency plan, say we lose power, we can still provide diesel service. Or on the other way, when say diesel prices go up with an oil embargo or something like that, we still have electric to provide a basic service.
And with our new construction project, we looked into hitting generators that were powerful enough to fuel an entire electric fleet and the campus. It was like $3 million per generator. They were the size of like semi trucks, and like, oh, we're gonna put these things. So that's another reason why we started to look at, let's do a hybrid type of fleet.
And for a generator for power did go off, he's talking about a huge generator.
Huge.
And just to have a generator of that size would be such a waste of money or taxpayer dollars for something we might use once every 5 years, maybe.
That'd be a waste.
Yes, sir. What about the existing building? Can you put panels on that? Or is that, what's this feature of that building?
Yeah, the administration building. We could, it wouldn't be a lot of solar panels to really make a dent in the future of that building. We haven't really, there's ideas that are floating around for it, but we haven't, nothing's been definitive about the admin building. So like I said earlier, we currently have a 2,500 amp service. So we have 3 of these chargers. Each charger can charge 2 buses. That's why I was saying earlier, if you get 20 to 25 electric buses, all you're going to need is 12 chargers because you can do dual dispensing chargers. Upon completion, we will have a 4,000 amp service going into the new campus. Like I mentioned earlier, we're looking at the idea of bringing in at least 6,000 amps. That way we're safe and we can always charge our buses. If we charge them at once, we'll be able to do that. We're still working on that. Been actually developed in the last couple of weeks, so we're actually working with Ameren to see what their idea is about bringing in the power, the service for that. Yeah, so we would have 10 chargers total, which are these, and then 2 rapid chargers. So these chargers currently take about 6 hours to fully charge a bus. You get a rapid charger, you can charge a bus in an hour, a little over an hour, so you can crank them out real quick. Or their idea is to put those rapid chargers also downtown the transit center, so now they have their layover, the drivers, they go inside, all they gotta do is plug it in. I mean, even for 15 minutes, you're still gonna get 10, 20%, which will keep them on the road, because right now the buses will last, what, 8 hours?
10 hours, we stretched out a bus, so 10 hours on one charge. We're predicting right now 9% battery usage. We don't go by miles because we don't do anything by miles. Everything we do is hours. Operator center runs in hours. So how long we can keep a bus out? Currently, we are handicapped with these level 2 chargers taking 6 hours. That means we can run 10 hours in the morning, 10 hours at night, or split them up, but that's all we get. Now with a rapid charger, we can actually make those an all-day bus, 16 hours by coming in and sitting in for 45 minutes, charge it all the way back up and stop the rest of the day. You don't want to do that to all your buses all the time because the technology says it's fine, but when you rapid charge a battery at home, you know it reduces your battery life. Right? And so the long-term effects of these batteries is still up in the air. These batteries are very expensive.
That's at the transit center. It's pretty neat. So yes, our plans are to install rapid chargers that will have the capacity to charge one bus about 30 to 40 minutes to an hour, which will provide more flexibility with the charging process and offer alternative charging option. The solar array projects, like I mentioned, it's a renewable source of energy, so at least you have some kind of encouragement that your electric fleet is being charged by renewable energy versus dirty energy, coal or nuclear. And hopefully this downtown will be operational probably sometime in the fall. So that's our goal, at least, or our thought process, our plan, why we're trying to do a hybrid fleet of diesel and electric buses and what's going to take to get there. And we started the process of replacing our fleet. The fleet probably won't be completely replaced for 6 or 7 years in the end. That's all it'll take. By the time she gets awarded the money, then you go out for a procurement, you do all that, then we get a board approval, and they get manufactured, and you're talking 2 years before we ever see a brand new bus. So our current fleet works very hard to keep those buses on the road every day. It's, they're very old, a lot of miles on a lot of those buses.
And we're short on mechanics, parts, and the buses are older, so that's, people say unreliable, but when you put out 180,000 miles a month on our buses, it's generally reliable, I would say, compared to the breakdowns.
Well, I think, thank you, that's really helpful. And it gives the board members information to chew on in terms of defining what your vision is for the future. There are, as we've said, there are some transit systems that have plunged ahead, and the direction was we want to be zero emission. We want to make that our reputation. We want to talk about branding. You want our brand to be recognized in the community as we are the clean leader. We've got a zero emission fleet, and compare that to all the trucks and school buses and cars in the street. We're leading the pack, but it's expensive. It has infrastructure implications. How you charge the buses is a big deal, because manufacturers will say you can have a bus that'll run all day on a charge. Maybe, depends on how long the blocks are in the system. And is that what you want? Is that your vision of the future? But that becomes an essential part of the strategic plan. We're going to talk about a couple of others before we take lunch, but that's one. We're not going to solve the problem today. You're not going to, board isn't going to vote on anything, but you really have a sense of where you could go, where you will wind up likely going, given what the staff has presented, and what's going on around the industry. I've come back to the sign that you happily put on the side of your electric buses. We care about the air in Peoria. And that's great. Now it defeats the purpose to some extent if we're using coal-based electricity that fuels the powers the generation of electricity. But that's a strategic planning question to go for the future. You're not going to settle that here, but you've certainly got to have the information you need to get a sense of how you direct staff and management as they come to you with the plan. Does that make sense? All right. Let's go on to a second part of the strategic plan, which is funding. And I'll tell you, there's more. You have a presentation on this also. The fair. Okay, we'll get to it. Fund. Right now, most of the cost of the and it was a great comment that someone said, "You mean their taxpayer amount dollars paying for the transit system?" I didn't know that. Well, that once upon a time, transit agencies like whatever was the predecessor to the transit district here in Peoria were privately owned. They were profit making. They had investors who got dividends. They were operated just like a public utility, just like the gas company, the electric company. They'd go to the Public Utilities Commission to get a rate increase when costs went up and ridership went down. We're not meeting our expenses. We need a fare increase. And the PUC would approve the fare increase. And this was going on all over the country. There were only a handful of transit systems and lots of big cities where transit was still privately owned back then. There were a few that were public. Chicago was one, Boston was one, but other big cities like Washington, D.C., Minneapolis, St. Louis, those were all operated by private companies just the same way. And then it all began to fall apart. And the first time transit really transformed from private to public was about the time CityLink was created 50 years ago. And that was the notion that we bet that transit is a public service and we have to preserve it. If we don't preserve it as a public service, it's going to disappear, because you've got this vicious cycle where costs go up, costs go up, fares go up, ridership goes down, service gets cut, ridership goes down more, and now you've got a bigger deficit. So the idea was to replace the private ownership notion with one that was public ownership that said we're going to subsidize transit as a public service. And that's true all over, everywhere in the country. You have a somewhat unique situation. I don't know on everybody in the world, so it may not be unique totally, but you have an extremely low fare. And everybody pointed out that it's affordability, is one of the virtues of CityLink, that you've got it costs $1 to ride if you're just paying an adult cash fare. It's half that if you're a senior citizen or a person with a disability. That's very low by industry standards. You're way below the median for transit systems your size. And the result is, as we heard, that the fares generate about 6 or 7% of your operating budget. Once upon a time, it would be 100%. The best any transit system in the country does today, New York City is probably 60%. You're at 6. So one of the questions is, there's one other issue. So we're emerging from the pandemic, and one of the things you have to imagine is what your ridership is likely to be and what it will take to attract new riders. What ridership did you have that maybe has gone away because of the trends that were accelerated during the pandemic? So one question is, how do you want to see transit financed in Peoria? And to what extent do you want to see the passenger fares cover the cost? And the reason that has to be addressed, that it's timely, is what you're going to hear in the presentation. You have an antiquated fare collection system. It's called GFI Odyssey. The Odyssey fare box system was state of the art 15 years ago. It's obsolete now. And GenFare, GFI GenFare, which is the owner prop of the company, you're not going to support it starting next year. So you're going to have trouble getting repair parts. You're going to have problems if the fare boxes fail, what support you can get from the manufacturer, because they're 2 generations ahead of this. So if you decide that you want to have a continuing reliance on some amount of fares, passenger fares, and you want to collect them on the bus and you want to put something for people to put the money into, you have to envision replacing your fare collection system anyway. And what it won't do are any of the state-of-the-art things that are being done now. In many cities, the future of fare payment is not to put coins in the fare box, but it's to tap your smartphone with a QR code on a reader, and it's going to go to an account up in the cloud that's managed by Visa, and you won't have to count cash at all. There's a cost to collecting money, right? You have to secure it. You have to maintain the fare boxes. You've got to have someone count it. You've got to transport it to the bank. You have closed circuit television to make sure people aren't stealing. You have an elaborate system, as every transit system does, just to be in the business of collecting fares. So it's a fair question whether you want to collect fares at all. If it only generates 6% of your revenue, and you're spending some amount of money to not just collect it, maintain it, and so forth, but also to replace the fare collection system, is that what you want to do? You're not alone in asking that question. Transit systems around the country are wrestling with the question of whether they should be in the fare collection business. Boston is going to try 3 routes where there'll be no fares collected on the bus. You have to pay off board. That's the way light rail is everywhere. It's the way bus rapid transit is everywhere. All off-board fare collection. You buy a ticket, or you have a kiosk, or better, you have mobile fare payment or a smart card. You're at a point anyway where you ought to be thinking about what kind of fare collection system you want, how user-friendly you want it to be, how many changes in what you've been doing historically would be done. But you also have the option of saying, maybe we don't do it at all, because you've already subsidizing 94 cents out of every dollar with public money. So before you wrestle with those global questions, let's hear about, we're talking about the fare collection system.
Well, guess they gave me the microphone back, so here we go again. So he kind of touched on a lot of it already. Our fare collection system there's a lot of moving parts with it. Kind of like you mentioned, we have to store it. Somebody every day has to go in there, count it, take it to the bank. That takes up, Kenny's usually one that doesn't, probably takes, 2 hours of your day every day away. We're going to go there, collect it, secure it, put it in a van, drive down to the bank, turn it in, and come back. So that's, a big chunk of his day already gone. The button thing. So there are other alternatives, other options out there. He did mention that GenFare, who's a supplier for our fare boxes, we met with them probably a year ago, and they kind of hit us with a bombshell, and they told us that the fare boxes we have now will no longer be supported by them. No more parts, nothing. So that becomes an issue because a lot of our fare boxes for maintenance department, they spend a good chunk of their week working on these things to keep them operational. And then all the stuff inside the actual money room, we have problems with all that, the coin counters and the, what's this thing called, I forget. Moves all the money down, the conveyor belt thing, or whatever. I forget what it's called. But a lot of our different types of equipment, they do fail on a regular basis. And they give us a quote. So in order for us to get new fare boxes put on our fleet for all of them, you're looking at about $3 to $4 million to upgrade them to the newer types of fare boxes, the state-of-the-art ones. And those do have the capability of, you could use your phone to scan the QR codes, you can pay on an app, you can do all of that stuff with it. And you can use reloadable cards, they give us the option, kind of like a debit card, so you preload it and you go in there and you can pay for your fare on the bus.
And actually, to your point, what we would have to do is collaborate with drugstores in the area, and that's what a lot of transit centers have done across the nation. So we would have to work with like Walgreens or CVS because we understand that, there's an underserved population that may not have access to smartphones, which is kind of funny in this day and age, but it's still out there. Or some people just don't feel comfortable with it, so they can use a prepaid loadable card where they could put their money on there and track it that way as well.
Or the other option with this is Shammer and I, for the past year, met with a variety of different companies that it's like a one-stop shop, all-inclusive app that you can do. So you can book your entire transit experience in Peoria off an app. So if we were to get microtransit, you could use it for Uber, the electric bikes they were talking about. You can get on there and plan out your map. This is what I've seen in bigger cities. So you go in these bigger cities, and I guess this is really big in Europe. Like, okay, you're gonna ride your bus for 20 minutes. You're gonna get off. You're gonna get to an Uber. Then you get on a little scooter and you be your destination. You book it all at once, or you can just book individual things like you do now. And her and I have been trying to get quotes. How much would this cost us to incorporate that into our system, which would make it very user-friendly for all of our passengers. Everybody today likes apps, smartphones, just the way the world is now. They're quoting us somewhere around $250,000 to $300,000 a year to keep this thing operational. Apps aren't cheap at all, especially something like this. But you could book the fixed route on there. No more points, no more paper money, no more tickets. You could book your paratransit on there. So.
Yeah, what we did find though with our research is that yes, there are apps out there that really help the transit centers as far as with the fixed route and microtransit and paratransit, as Nick was explaining. But Nick or Doug, he might be a little upset because we were talking just the other day, and if I bring you all into this, then that means that our money is a little bit lower. But we were thinking about having an all-inclusive app where you have everything on that one app instead of having all these different apps on your smartphone. But we found as we talked to these different technology companies that deal with transit centers that there's not an app that's actually all inclusive with everything, because there's different technology companies that deal with the bikes and they deal with the Uber. But I was just telling Doug that, you know, if we created that app, then we could become millionaires, so. we have to
There was one
work on
company that we
that.
found out of Europe that they were really close to having that all-inclusive app. That's kind of what Brent and I have been talking about. I mean, it does exist, but it won't be cheap.
Yeah.
So that is a way to
That's
do
state
it.
of the art.
Yeah, the state-of-the-art one. So this is kind of like a visual aid of what it is we could potentially put on our buses. So if we weren't to go with GenFare anymore, we were to use like those companies out there for like Token Transit, for example, or Token, I think it's called. They have something like this. They put a little scanner on your bus. You just use your phone, a little QR code. So you pay for your fare. It's touchless. These are becoming very, very popular all over the country because of the pandemic. And we're touching.
Or you can use that reloadable
For the
card.
reloadable cards.
So those are options that could be for microtransit, fixed route, or paratransit.
And we've had demos of these apps. They're pretty neat. You go in there to your profile and you can load up your fare bank account for as much money as you want, or other people can transfer money in for you. It's actually pretty neat.
So right here, one of the things that we talked about with these technology-based companies that deal with transit centers is support for service. So since we're moving and trying to upgrade into, new technology, we would have to require 24-hour customer service support because people want to know where their money's at. So if they have any issues with their reloadable cards or even with their smartphone, once, they want to look at their balance and they're having issues seeing that, we want to make sure that we have communication that's ongoing so people will know exactly, how to use the app, how to use the notifications, and then also see their balance. Then also we looked at a 5-year agreement. So out of the 5-year agreement, it would be a 3-year agreement that would be solid and then 2 optional years. And we're looking at the cloud-based system or server, compatible with iOS. A lot of people love Apple and Android. And then also we want to be able to track dashboard information just so that we can report back to the board and also to the public.
In finance, that's how they would track what money went. They were to go this route. These are just some of the companies that we've spoken to. See, there's tokens on here. We got ModeShift, Meet, Move It, Wasabi. They all essentially offer the same thing. Like he mentioned, collecting money. It costs money to collect money. So they're all kind of different in how they would price. Some are, they want to take 10% of your dollar. Some are like, we'll take 8% of your dollar, but we won't give you, we'll give your startup costs for free, and your little scan things you put on your buses, we'll install them for free, but the cost of this much. There's all these different kind of quotes going around, so we would choose the one we would feel would be the best fit for CityLink.
And then that's just kind of giving you an idea of what it would look like on your smartphone.
Yeah, this is what our customers would see.
And then
They book the route.
Yep, you can see their destination as well as their balance. So what we have currently, so we have a little bit of technology with CityLink. MyStop, it runs with our Evel system, so it gives you real-time fixed route bus information and tracking. Used as a trip planner, CityLink bus stop locations have stop IDs. I know that Kenny spent lots of time, hours, putting those out so that people can track exactly where their buses are at and when it's coming. And then service alerts and text messaging is also available. Another type of current service that we have is Move It. We haven't really made an investment with Move It, so we're not paying Move It for what they are providing us, but it's kind of like a static page where people can at least use it for Google Maps. So for instance, if someone was coming from Dallas, Texas, or Detroit, and they came to Peoria, they can at least still use that app if that's what they're used to in their community. They can at least go to that app and be able to figure out how to use our transportation system here in Peoria.
That's something that we've spoken about. It was actually Emily that said this a long time ago. Is every time you go to a different city and you want to book a ride, you have to download like 4 different apps to figure out, which transit agency is this? Okay, which app is it? So our goal is just to have a one-stop as much as we possibly can, build into one app to serve our community.
So this brings me to just talking to you briefly about the bike share. This is something that we really want to try to implement into the Peoria area, but we would have to have a board weigh in on this as well. But we were thinking about adding bikes, from the Bradley area, Bradley University, all the way down to the downtown area. And maybe, we could collaborate also with U of I College of Medicine because, we have future doctors that need to get over to the hospital. And then also we would have some bikes available down at our transit center. So we worked with Discover Peoria, and I know that they probably got caught up on some other projects, but we are still willing to try to work with them in some kind of capacity. And so we can restart the partnership in the future, and then we have a collaboration. This is something that we would like to consider moving towards. Since scooters is not.
Bikes are not $100. So scooters, electric scooters, we don't have funding for this yet, but it's something that her and I have talked about for a long time. Kind of the same thing. You could put electric scooters, like I'm sure you've all seen in big cities. You could put them on Bradley's campus, or you could put them at the transit center. Maybe we could potentially work with East Peoria so people can go over the bridge. So I think it'd be fun to go over the bridge on scooters, in my opinion. But you can go over there, that's where all the shopping is. Because like Jason mentioned earlier, there's really nothing down. There's not even a convenience store or a Walgreens. It doesn't exist. Whereas everything after the transit center across the bridge. So that's another thought that we've had is you put these bikes and scooters. It's another way to attract people to our transit system. The young kids probably think that's great. You can get on a scooter, ride over to wherever, leave them there. You just scan them and off you go.
So yeah, we just found with the scooters, we probably have to work with the city of Peoria as well as the state just to see if that's something that we would be able to potentially do in the future.
Just an idea. We don't know if you can be allowed.
Yeah. So this brings us to the present setbacks and costs. Currently, we do not have funding.
No money for bikes.
Yeah. So thanks to Jamie, though, she's always looking out for different funding opportunities that are out there so that we can try to be forward thinkers and just keep moving in the direction of providing technology and better transportation service for our community. Cost to have transportation with this app would be about $250,000, as Nick was just talking about. And we do acknowledge that everyone does not own a smartphone. So that's why we're talking about the reloadable prepaid cards. And there's no app available for every transportation option, but we can look at, the service technology that we do have right now currently and what we can move towards with what we offer with transportation service.
Gen Fair was the closest I think we found to be almost all-inclusive, if that makes any sense at all. They were pretty close. They said you can book a lot of your different kinds of services through their app. And their app is much more expensive than these apps. Millions of dollars a year versus hundreds of thousands of dollars a year.
That kind of brings us to fare collection. So with the fare collection discussion, as you can see on this slide, that's pretty much what our fare boxes look like currently on our fixed route buses. So CityLink has fare boxes that have gone obsolete, which we just talked about. Gen Fair has approached us about upgrades. We talked to them, I want to say that was like February, March sometime. And then they also talked to us about the maintenance service in the future that will not be provided. So those are some things that we have to consider because as these fare boxes start breaking down, what are we going to do?
I mean, it collect money, and that's why we looked at other alternatives.
Walk me through, okay, I'm getting on the bus, I do this device. What are my options there? It says swipers, that when I want a bus pass from me, but does it also mean that I can swipe my debit right there?
No.
Only for bus pass, it's only for bus
Yeah.
pass.
Yeah. Cash coin.
Yeah.
And then it does actually take cash. Right?
It does, yeah.
Like bills, dollars.
Mhm.
And coin. But not credit card.
No, yeah, that's where we're a little obsolete.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, we're talking about CityLink, how do we collect fares for city lifting? That all play into this, plays in this whole strategy.
No, they actually don't use the fare collection boxes.
So then how does that make it work?
But,
It's
yeah,
Cash.
the cashes, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they just have a pouch with them.
Yeah, they think it's okay. Okay,
Mhm.
yeah. So there's no technology used to
No.
prepare transition. Okay.
And this technology that we're talking about, a little box you can scan your phone or your debit card or your local card, you can also put those on your paratransit box.
Yep.
They're really
Record
small,
trains,
they're
all
like,
that.
it's a little notepad, it's a pretty tiny little thing.
So then Nikki just talked about also the cost for adding new fare boxes, which is going to be about $1 million for the software and marketing of a new payment booking system. So we have to keep that in mind, as well as the $3 to $4 million in order to upgrade the hardware.
Yep, you have to also keep in mind too, we do go this route, there could be a big learning curve for the public, because they have to learn a whole new system of how to pay.
Yeah.
And it could take a little bit of time to market it, so it might be a increase in fares before you get it back up and start attracting different kinds of riders.
So then, okay,
Also, gonna say not a lot of people really carry cash, so if you were to go digital like this, like we keep talking about, you could attract a whole different variety of riders out there. You know, younger people could be like, you know, this is awesome, so I don't have cash, and I know how to track it on my phone, to collect their phone, so I can just put my ride down, and off we go. Our buses are $1 versus $20 in Uber charges to get across town.
yeah.
Might take you a little bit longer, but you know, we were gonna talk about something else with micro.
Yeah.
Eventually today.
So the question is kind of posed, do we really want to, you know, add fare collection technology on the old buses, or do we want to wait until we get the new buses? So,
Or just go fare free.
yep,
Multiple
brings
options
us to
here,
that.
which you could do.
Yeah, so this is a part of the other scenario that we were thinking of. So when we talk about Gen Fair, this is basically the technology that they provide currently right now. And this is where we're trying to get to if this is the route we want to go. So we could look at using the app. We could look at using the new fare collection equipment that they have available. We could look at using both options because that's what some transit centers are doing. Or fare free is the other option. So there's 4 different options that we can look at.
Yeah, I mean, you could go completely cashless, but still collect fares with reloadable cards and phones. Use this, or you can keep doing what we're doing, spend millions of dollars to upgrade to this. This could go on the big buses, that could go on paratransit, or that could go on both. Paratransit or fixed route buses. It's a lot of different, it's a lot of different options you can choose from. So.
So now we're gonna kind of pivot to something different here. Okay.
You want us to, we gonna touch on micro transit later?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll talk about micro transit later. That's another option. Plan something.
I think we'll just concentrate on fare collection.
Okay.
I do, yeah. Okay. Well, we got
Sir,
Like, how many of our, what percent of our typical bus riders have a smartphone? You know that, or I feel like we need to know that.
You know, I was gonna say something there. It's surprising how few people in society do not have a smartphone of some kind or another. That's almost universal, but one of the challenges to some of these unique fare collection systems is that there are people who have no bank account and no credit card. And the challenge is not so much can you have this as your fare payment, it's how do you replenish your account. Now, there's a way to do that. And you can do it if you're partnering with banks and Walgreens and Stop and Shop or whatever the big chain stores. They can be a location to accept payment in small amounts. So you can add to your or account as little as $2 or $3 or $4 at a time, rather than to buy $60 or $70 worth of transit fare at once. But that's an issue, and it's a Title VI equity issue that every transit system that does one of these changes to the fare system will have to address, because it's a federal requirement that if you're going to change the fare structure, you must talk about how it impacts low-income and minority communities. Now, the other thing, though, that this can do is fare capping. And right now, I can pay $1 and get one fare. Is there an all you can ride pass?
Yes.
For that,
Day pass.
There's
you can have an all-day pass.
Yeah,
Is there a 5-day pass? 30-day?
30-day.
Right. Fare capping lets you say, we're going to have a whole mixture of different fares that build in various incentives to be more frequent riders. So if you ride the bus once, the system charges you $1. If you ride it twice, it charges you another $1. If you ride it a third time, you ride for free, because you've now paid for a day pass. And if you ride it 10 times, it'll give you the 10th ride for free, because you could have bought a 10-ride ticket that's discounted at the price of 9 trips. Or you could take, say, after 30 rides in a month, now everything you do in that month is free, because you paid for a monthly pass. But that has to be done up in the cloud. That's why you don't want to be doing the back office stuff to manage that kind of.
There's tons of options they can do.
Oh, well, here's your system.
You can share your rides with other people, you can transfer to other accounts. If you don't have a debit card, you don't want a reloadable card, like customer service can upgrade your, or put money into your account, use your phone, get on the scan, there's all kinds of options. There's a lot of different ways to pay doing something like this. If you don't want to go to like a Walgreens to reload your card, do it for you. Transit center, it's very easy, they show us demos, it's simple.
First, somewhere, would you guys send me a copy of that chart right there that you got?
Yes.
My concern right now is that I'm hearing all this stuff, okay? I have an iPhone out of, because my kids make me. But I'm just an ordinary senior citizen. This is, I mean, over the top for me. And I'm thinking, what is the process that you guys have in mind? No matter, because we have to change, that's obvious, something, that change has got to come. So, no matter which way you go, how have you thought about educating the public? Because right now, I have a hard time doing one of those, let alone all the stuff that you guys are telling me to come down the road. So, you've done some legwork and your homework, but where do you want this to go from here? Because eventually going to come to the board, and I need to know what you're leaning toward, so I have a glimmer of what's coming. You know what I mean?
What's everybody's?
I mean, they're free.
I got mine.
Can I add to you? And I'll add to that. So obviously you've done some heavy lifting. What are the synergies that we can leverage with, and I don't know, with benchmarking that we've done, with, I don't know, either locally with how we coordinate with, I don't know, Peoria Charter Coach, or was it Arlington Trailblazers, or have we benchmarked with the systems in Bloomington, Quad Cities, Champaign, other systems somewhat like our size, or after that, how does any of that play into this?
I mean, we've somewhat spoken to other transit agencies about how this is working for them. I don't know if anybody in our area would be committed to this yet.
We did have an initiative with IDOT about a statewide, maybe downstate, I think maybe in Chicago, but a statewide fare collection system, like an app everybody could use. I think they're doing one in California. We had one in Massachusetts, but we heard from IDOT that they aren't interested in proceeding with it. So we're kind of all
Good, comment?
Just to let you know from what I've experienced in the past on the implementation side, the system I worked at in Georgia, we were, similar to this, where there's a lot of coin cash, the magnetic tickets, and then we had upgraded to using the magnetic cards, where you can do tap and pay credit cards. And we run the same fare collection system in Cobb County as we're at, that MARTA had, that Gwinnett County had, so it was all interconnected. And it was over the course of a year that there was education and customer service outreach. I mean, they had, for all the ticket vending machines they had downtown and at MARTA, they had like a customer service agent at each one helping people to purchase their card, show them how to reload it, how to register the card if they lose it, so that way they can still get their money. I mean, it was a pretty involved process, but once everyone was familiar with the system, everyone was pretty happy with it. So it did take a lot of outreach and a lot of education and stuff like that, but the end result is good.
To answer your question too, some of the companies where I've spoken to, a lot of their price would be marketing blitz campaigns. They would come and they would be on site and they would do like demos for people. Like they would sit at the transit center, like, okay, bring your phone, I'll show you how to do it. And they we have our screens down there and they put like little tutorials, like little 30-second videos. Here's your app. This is what you do. Log on, create an account. This is how you do it.
Okay, 2 questions. What does this do then to the employees that you have in the transit center that collect the monies for the taxes now? Is that eliminating a job because you're going to do this way? My other concern is that we're going to be expecting our consumers to go to someplace else to load that card. So you already have, they're already in a transportation issue because they're coming to you. But then you got to send them someplace else, and there's no Walgreens, no CVS. There's nothing that's close to them, like right to our transit center right now. So that would be my concern. If we go to that, how is there a way that we can help them load that card, or is that a process that we can't do from the city?
The companies we've spoken to, they've told us that our customer service reps could load the cards. We can
Okay.
reload their accounts. If you don't want a card, you just put money into your account, use your phone, you scan your phone, on the thing, and you get on the bus.
Okay,
Transponder
but then
or
don't we
whatever.
go back to when you said this, everybody doesn't have a phone that would do that. So they have to have a card
It gets very convoluted very
that
quickly.
you add money to. And so, am I wrong that you said they have to go to like a third party to add money to that card? Because we can't, I mean, to me, we're making this monumental for people that are already at a disadvantage. We're making it harder for them to get on that bus. When our overall vision is to be a wow group and to make it easier for our consumers. So,
These are some of the same problems we
okay,
about.
so we don't have any solutions for that, but we know that we're on a time crunch because the vendors that we have currently are not gonna provide maintenance for this. How long do we have before they kick us to the curb?
Turn of the year.
It's about to happen. All right.
Then let's say, for example, we decide, okay, let's upgrade the new boxes. We do it all, even if we order them now, and then we have to install them. You have to put them on, you want to put these new fare boxes on old buses. And another thing that we've had that our foreman told us about is where they mount on the buses, that area is becoming strict. They're not wanting to hold on the buses anymore. So how can you install them on the bus and help? So.
And to kind of go back on the underserved population, I mean, the other option too is even if you did go to using equipment that allow people to use their smartphone or they can use a credit card, you can also still keep it so that they can use coins or money or whatever. So that's still an option.
The other part of this too is we give a lot of free rides and a lot of people are riding for 50 cents. Just want to go down one road or just go fare free?
Yeah.
What's the easier solution here? For our riders, not for us.
Okay.
Different just, I'm playing both sides.
Let me say this, the visit that I made to the transit center, and I sat there with those ladies that were, you know, a lot of people came up and got the 30-day pass for the $40. I didn't, well, and of course I wouldn't know. But when you're looking at your population, the student, the veteran and seniors for the 50 cents, I'm thinking the majority of our people are the ones that are the $40, $3 or a buck. And I'm not even concerned as much about the dollar one as I am with that 30-day pass. So I'm not thinking that the majority of our money is coming from those four in the middle. Is that, I mean, so to me, we're putting a disadvantage to that person that I know that is coming down to use the transit, to use our buses for their necessity of work, go to the grocery store, whatever. So I'm concerned about the $40 person, not the ones that are 50 cents, or the ones that are $1.03. I want to know what we're going to do, how we're going to do it for that $40 person that comes in there and buying that pass, because they know that they need that every day, and they do not have an iPhone. So I just want, when you guys bring me this proposal to the board for us to say you want to spend X number of dollars, I need you to make sure you have told me what you're going to do for that, because I think that's where the majority of our money comes from, is the $40. Is that wrong? Help me.
Not the $3 passes and the dollar passes.
Are the most
frequent.
The most frequent.
Yeah,
Okay.
most of it's $3. Unfortunately, or whatever you want to say, the community that we serve can't afford to buy a $40 pass.
Okay. Okay.
So they're riding, they're paying a lot of $3 on the bus, you know, paying $2 to get their day pass, or they're coming to the transit center getting $3 from the dollar.
Okay. Okay.
That's helpful. One more thing. We do have down in the border, correct, CDM machine, where you transfer tickets when we have no has to pay the tax. That machine could be updated to handle credit cards. It could be updated to actually take care of adding more money to the account.
Yeah, we have to replace that.
Yeah, so instead of getting tickets per month, you get your local card. That's how you serve your $40.
And that machine.
Then it comes back to, are you eliminating a job with those 2 million that are sitting there? Okay.
Oh, no.
And I apologize
Yeah.
for, but I just wanna, I don't want anybody to suffer because of change. We need to change because we have to change. But I wanna make sure we take into consideration all the venues along the way of that change because of so many people that we affect.
You're constantly answering the phone down there for questions, so yeah.
Right.
I was gonna say, Kenny can tell you, even if you, whatever route you go, you do the fare bonuses, you do the app, where you go fare free, you're always gonna need customer service down there to answer questions.
Okay.
Especially with the route changes, the evolution of the route changes are always gonna be evolving. We're always gonna need them down there. Your bus is over there, your stop's over here, this route, this, on time. All they do is
I
answer.
don't wanna lose anybody, and I don't wanna make it, we're trying to be better, and I don't wanna make it worse for our constituents, because we have to change.
Two interesting observations. One is that your 30-day pass is priced, the multiple is 40 times the regular fare. That's high. Your dollar fare is very low by industry standards, but the 40 rides to get any benefit, you got to ride more than 40 times in 30 days to get any benefit to buy the 30-day pass, right? So you price that pretty high. Most places are less because the whole idea is to try to get people to ride more often. And if I've already bought unlimited rides for 30 days, I might as well ride a lot. Another thing is that if you have fare capping, you can have even a 5-day pass, a 2-week pass. Because right now, if I'm not pretty sure I'm going to ride 40 times in a month,
Right.
why would I buy it?
Right.
Then I'll buy single day passes. You can also have a 10-ride ticket or a multi-ride. You say, I'm going to buy 20 rides at a time. And that's not going to expire at the end of the month. I've got $20 worth of rides in the bank, but I'm only going to pay for 18. So my incentive is that I'm getting a discount when I use it up, and the sooner I use it up, the sooner I get my benefit.
It's a better structure.
So the more you buy, the less you pay.
Exactly. I mean, so this gets really complicated. And unfortunately, you're under some time pressure because you're just a few months away from having GenFair walk away from supporting the system you've got. But you've got some fascinating choices, one of which is, by the way, to say, let's subsidize 100% of the cost of transit instead of 94%. Some cities have done that. And Kansas City is the big one. The city of Kansas City has said we're going to have free fares. We're not going to mess with fare collection. And we, the city of Kansas City, will support. We're going to subsidize that with taxpayer money because we think it's a good thing to do. Then you get the argument from people who say, well, if I buy gasoline, I'm paying a gas tax to support road construction and road maintenance. Why do you let the transit driver drive for free? They should pay something. So you've got an equity question about whether you want, as a matter of policy, to require that the people who ride the bus contribute something toward the cost of their trip. Yeah.
One of the biggest complaints that I heard during COVID when we were letting people ride for free is that certain buses or certain routes would turn into basically rolling homeless shelters, where the homeless would get on the buses and they would sit in there and drink or do whatever else and ride the bus all day. And then that would drive away other customers.
And there are ways to deal with that. One of which is going to be our after lunch discussion when we talk about pilot projects and partnering, is what role do you as CityLink play in dealing with the local agencies, whoever they are, that deal with the homeless problem? And what relationship have you developed, and if you haven't, what relationship could you develop that says, how are we going to work together? We want to help support the notion that we don't like homeless people living on the streets of Peoria. We certainly don't want them living on the bus. And we don't want crime on the bus. What do you do to make people feel safe and when they're riding on the bus and feel that if something happened, God forbid, that there'd be emergency response? We'll talk about that later. But talk about strategic planning. Here is as fundamental a question of strategy as there is. Are you going to, as a matter of policy, does the Peoria Transit District expect its customers to pay something for their trip? And if so, how much should it be? Because right now it's really low. So you might say, we want to come up with a new fare system that will double the revenue that we generate from fare collection. Or you might say, we're perfectly happy getting 6% of our operating budget from that. We just want to make it easier for people to pay, or give people more options. Or we're going to spend a lot of money to have a new fare collection system with a lot of bells and whistles, and these are wonderful things, but they're expensive. And is it worth it to you to collect 6 cents, $7?
There's not just training involved, but public, there's training involved for us. It'll take up 9 hours. It's like putting all these fares takes up 9 hours a week, and going to the bank, so maintenance or attention to be shipped elsewhere.
It's a major commitment.
It really is.
So we're not going to make this decision today.
No.
But
There's one more thing.
Sure.
And this is food for thought for Christine and her team. What could we do then if we went free to make up the $600,000 that we get? Did you increase the tax levy enough to do that?
Well, right now, we do have a cap for the tax levy every year. Like I said, it's 50 million. However, right now we are around the 12. It's really close to that. I think in the past we do have issue. We want to reach that kind of cap. Also, I want to remind everybody regarding our financial situation. So far, because we are so lucky, we have a CARE Act money to cover the pandemic kind of shortage. But Sharon probably can confirm with me. Before I work here, we did cover 65% from the state. However, right now we are so lucky, 65 highest. In the past, what happened is, I think 6 or 7 years ago, we almost stayed, we want to change back to the 55%. And then 10% has already caused a lot of stress at that time. We don't know when funding. But right now, 6% of the bus revenue, I would strongly recommend to let it go away because it is a big portion for us right now. Especially our operating expenses, increase every year. With the majority of our operating expenses stay on the benefit and employee wage. And right now, overtime is quite high, so it causes a lot of stress on ours. Like I say, buying now, our operating expense could be a question.
Well, this is, I know we're probably gonna go to break here, but I just had 2 comments, questions. One, as you continue to move forward with giving us more information and we're looking at how we, serve our underserved population and, payments. And so any of that factor in for people that get government assistance and us taking fares off the link card, for instance, that's how they pay with a lot of things today with the link card. And then 2, this is going to be, a lot of money for overhead. So are there any specialty, state or federal programs that we need to apply for that are directly related to fare collection or technology or any of this, where we can get another funding source based on specifically on this need?
Jamie, she's been looking at different types of ways that we can create funding for fare collection. And then I like the idea what you were saying too, like using the EBT card. You have to work with the state to see if that's something that will comply with, whatever the regulations are for that. I think that's a great idea.
Well, that's a lot of food for thought. Now we can take a break and have some food for the body. Well, I think maybe if we go 45 minutes or so for lunch. That's great. Help yourself.
But I